Are you buying or selling that Jalen Hurts could be seriously regressing and hurting the Eagles at this point going forward? Now, let me lay out some points for you here, Hunter. I feel like I gathered pretty good tidbits of information without going overboard because there's a lot of stuff I could have included that I left out because I just didn't want to go overboard and I don't want to throw too much at everyone's face at once. But stick with me here. Look, to me, alarming numbers this season, but not just this season. We have last season as well. And right off the bat, I want to address, yes, I am very aware that essentially Jalen Hurts has gone from 3 seasons, 3 coordinators. So yeah, I want to get that right out the way, right off the bat, because that is something that needs to be acknowledged. And for what it's worth, yeah, is that probably part of the reason the development has been hindered and what we're seeing is also what we're seeing? Yeah, it very likely is included in that. But let's get to the points of why it's concerning irregardless. Okay, finished last season with a total of 3,858 passing yards, 23 passing touchdowns, 15 interceptions. Now, along with that, 605 rushing yards with 15 rushing touchdowns. I do think it's pretty important to remember, though, that a majority of those rushing touchdowns come from the famous tush push. And that's just a fact of the matter where we're crediting those touchdowns to the O-line more than Jalen Hurts. Yes, Jalen Hurts is able to take the tush push. He's humongous, so it works for him. And I'm not taking that away from him, but that's more of an O-line rushing touchdown than it even is a Jalen Hurts rushing touchdown. I think we can all agree on that. This season, 930 yards passing, which is 10th in the league, 4 touchdowns, 4 interceptions, 163 rushing yards with 2 rushing touchdowns. Now we're looking at a minus 4.6 EPA per play, which is, or EPA, yeah, just EPA total, which is 16th in the league. So we're right split down the middle, which I was a little surprised with. But anyways, I thought it was going to be a little bit, lower or higher, however you want to say it. You get what I'm saying? But here's where things really do become problematic. And this is a stat that should alarm every single Eagles fan. Look, 3.10 seconds to throw, which is second in the league. And along with that, you tie this together and it becomes really concerning. 13 sacks taken, which is tied for sixth. So we have all the time in the world back there to read, dissect, figure things out, and we're still getting sacked at one of the highest rates in the league, and we're still not getting touchdowns and turning the ball over significantly. I mean, to me, that's a problem. But to me, it's not even the turnovers. It's more the lack of production, given the fact that the line is playing good ball, which we'll get into in a second. And again, I want to acknowledge as well, before I move on to the next point, I'm fully aware that this team hasn't had the weapons fully in place besides week one. But what I want to add to that as well is we go back to that week one tape. We're not sitting here saying that Jalen Hurts was the reason that they won that game. If anything, the 2 turnovers he had were crucial. Call it for what it is, really bad turnovers that essentially, in my opinion, more than anything, made it so that it was a closer game than it had to be. Right? The Eagles' running game was hitting on all cylinders, and that's kind of a theme you can point to this year. Is the run game has been kind of saving this team much more than Jalen Hurts. That's an absolute fact. Look, and so number two, I think that I'm a big major concern that doesn't exist for other quarterbacks that we can say, right, in regards to their development and regression is, look, to me, Hurts is playing with an elite O-line group, and if not an elite O-line group, a really good one. And, we could sit here and I thought about other guys that I was going to talk about this with because there are other quarterbacks we could sit here and have had this discussion about. But the difference between them and Jalen Hurts is that I look at their O-line and I'm like, well, right, the team hasn't put the resources in the right area. But I can't sit here and say that for Jalen Hurts, which is why to me it's so concerning, right? And I want to also acknowledge along with this is what, like, look, the group of the O-line hasn't been consistent all year due to injury, and it's kind of been mix and mash. But regardless, every single week it's an above average unit, if not an elite unit, despite all that. And look, I'm going to tie it together with the biggest problem here to me, and it's the thing that really is, again, if this wasn't the case, if we were still on that rookie deal, all this wouldn't be right a point. I wouldn't even be sitting here talking about this. But the problem with the situation, Jalen Hurts is taking up $51 million for an average salary, which is 22.69% of the entire team salary cap, along with the 110 million guaranteed. So we're essentially taking up 1/4 of the team's entire salary cap with Jalen Hurts, and he's not playing the same ball he did in 2022 before the massive extension, before all this was in place, and at least all the cap was starting to affect how they can spend money. So you let me know what you're thinking with those points, Hunter.
I think my biggest thing with Hurts is I think if you watch who Hurts is, obviously he benefited a lot from that offensive line, being able to get those rushing touchdowns, and that may have inflated how good of a player the general public perceives that he is. And Hurts can be a good quarterback. And we saw what he was when he had the offensive line, he had the weapons, he had the coach. The biggest thing, the coaches have consistently changed. And we know his relationship with Sirianni. Now, you talked about right now that Jalen Hurts, in time to throw, he is the second longest. First is Brock Purdy, right? And we know Brock Purdy, you can kind of compare to Jalen Hurts in a way of he has the coach. He has, a coach that knows how to scheme up their line, probably the best left tackle in football, to protect for him well, right? And the issue with Hurts is right now, right? So you think that if he has all this time to throw in the world and he's going to be sitting back there, that, maybe routes are developing. Maybe he's taking his time to throw downfield. But that's just not the case. He is 22nd in deep throw percentage, which is passes that go for 20 or more yards in the air. And then when you look at tight window throws, and if you want a definition of what tight window throws are, that's basically the percentage of passes where the targeted receiver has less than 1 yard of separation when the pass arrives. So he's not throwing it deep. And in tight window throw percentage, he is currently 21st. So he's not even fitting the ball into tight windows where his receivers can get it. So I guess my concern is, okay, we knew you were really good when you had a good line, when you had good receivers, and you had good coaching. Now, the line isn't as good as it was when he had that breakout year. And we know the coach is not as good as Shane Steichen, I think, is generally believed to be a better play caller, better coach than what Kellen Moore is, right? Like Shane Steichen's a head coach. Kellen Moore has been offensive coordinator. Like he hasn't really gotten those head coach looks.
And he consistently shifts
right.
teams.
So I guess my thing is when you pay Jalen Hurts that much money and you still have one of the best receivers in football. I know he's been out. And then you also have Devonta Smith. You have Saquon Barkley. Like, there's a lot to lean on here, and something's not working. Something is not working, but when you pay Jalen Hurts that salary, he has to be able to elevate those guys to that next level, regardless of kind of the situation you're in. So I think the regression is hurting him. I think the regression is obviously hurting the team, is what I meant to say. But it also hurts that they have not been able to supply him with necessarily the best play caller. Not that he's the best play caller in the world, but someone even like to the level of Shane Steichen. And I know those guys don't grow on trees. Obviously, that's why we have bad offenses in the NFL. But you could argue that Jalen Hurts has one of the better supporting casts. And he should be better. They should be better. So I don't know. It just seems like Hurts is making a lot of decisions that he wasn't making like a year ago. It's almost like he's trying to force something into happening positive and it's just biting him in the ass. So I do like Jalen Hurts and I do think that he can be a good quarterback in the right situation, but I just don't know if the situation is right now.
Well, but that's the thing that I want to add, Hunter, because and that's the problem to me with a lot of like the modern discussion around quarterbacks. And we talked about this, when the camera's not on. I think a big problem nowadays is that there's way too much reliance on, well, I need the system to be perfect and I need all my weapons in place. Like, it's a point where when you're taking up 25% of the team's salary cap to like what you just said, you got to be the one elevating everybody. I'm not hearing this whole, I need all my weapons, right? We got to, and we're not going to sit here and act like Kellen Moore hasn't produced productive passing offenses before, because that's one thing that I'm not going to sit here and debate. He has. And so on top of all that, really, here's where it comes down to. I just think here's really the bottom line, because I go back to this all the time. We see the greatest quarterbacks in history consistently. We have, where and the two most recent examples they'll always use and always go back to because they're the pinnacle of quarterbacking. We see Tom Brady and Mahomes not needing all the weapons. So in every single year where, right, besides essentially the Tyreek Hill Super Bowl, we're not looking at the Chiefs like, oh yeah, they were so loaded with weapons. It's like, yeah, no, they had Travis Kelce and they have guys that do their role. And yeah, now Rashee Rice too. But to me, having two really good weapons is not like, oh, we're fully loaded. And back to the Patriots, Tom Brady won a Super Bowl with Philip Dorsett as his ex-receiver, right? I mean, I'm not hearing this whole like the modern discussion on weapons has become way too ridiculous. Like, if the quarterback knows the system, if the footwork is consistent and they're getting the ball out on time where it needs to be, the weapons, as long as they're doing the bare minimum and doing their job, it's not going to be a problem. But that's the thing, is we're way too reliant on outside the pocket shit happening, way too reliant on all the guys being healthy. That's not football. And it's especially not football, Hunter, when you're taking up 25% of the team's cap and then you have less money to spend on depth. That's another thing, is these quarterbacks now, they all want to, right? We talk about this all the time. They all want to big dick each other. It's my money. It's my money. I deserve all the money. Well, guess what? When all the money's yours, where's the rest of the money going to build depth on your team? When one of your star receivers gets hurt, how are you going to have better backups? When one of your star alignment is hurt, how are you going to have a better backup? Unless you're drafting perfectly, which most organizations don't do.
Yeah, I think another thing, I don't know. I think every quarterback deserves like a good situation. I think Jalen Hurts is in a pretty good one. So right now, Jalen Hurts is 20. Oh, wait, hold on. I just lost them. But basically, this is where I was looking. In big time throw percentage, okay, Jalen Hurts is sitting right around. I just lost him. I just had him. But anyway, in turnover worthy plays, right now, Jalen Hurts leads the league by 4, right? But when you want to look at his big time throw percentage, he is currently sitting around 23rd in the league, right? So he's not taking a lot of big time throws, but he's still putting the ball in harm's way. And I think that's pretty concerning. When you look at his average depth of target, he's sitting around 13th in the league. Actually, he's tied for 12th with CJ Stroud. So not pushing the ball crazy downfield like we were talking about earlier, but he's still putting the ball in harm's way. And I think that's the concern, is maybe he's not making his decisions fast enough. I think that may be one of the big things that we're seeing here. I mean, that's at least what the stats are saying. But I know from the games that I have seen with Jalen Hurts this year, something just seems like something's not clicking. Like, what is not? I really need to know, like, what is the issue in Philly? Because it seems like they're not on the same page with the coaching staff. Doesn't seem like they're on the same page on the field. And while this Philadelphia team, the stats may show that they're not the worst team on offense, I don't know if this is a team that you can trust going into the playoffs against a very strong team.
Absolutely. And that's the whole thing, Hunter. That's the point. Is I want to be crystal clear before we end this. I'm not saying that Jalen Hurts hasn't shown us that he's a good quarterback, that he hasn't had fantastic year, because he has. And as a matter of fact, he should have been Super Bowl MVP and all that, right? Heartbreaker. And all that it will be acknowledged and has been acknowledged. I'm not saying Jalen Hurts is a bad quarterback. What I'm saying is, for what he's being paid right now and what he's producing, there's a discussion that needs to be had. That's the bottom line.
Yep. Well, thank you guys so much for watching. If you don't know ball and want to know ball, be sure to subscribe. Leave a like. Let us know in the comments what you think the issue is in Philly. Is it the coaching staff? Is it Jalen Hurts? Thank you so much for watching. Have a great rest of your night.